Alright guys, we've finally made it to the Series 7 finale. Before we crack on, just a bit of housekeeping. Views are down, but thousands of you are still checking in, so thank you all so much for sticking with me during this muddy battle of mediocrity. Black Mirror Season 6 is coming soon, which will keep me occupied until I find something else to fill the gap in the late summer and autumn. I also have a mega review of both Night and Day of the Doctor, exclusively available on Patreon right now, so definitely check that out before the 60th anniversary rolls around in November. As mentioned in my Idiot's Lantern review, it's only £1 at the door to watch this stuff, and you get access to a bunch of other exclusive goodies too. Now that I've got that out of the way, let's put this series to bed once and for all. For the longest time, this episode agitated me solely on the basis that we never actually found out the Doctor's name. This, for me, now 10 years on, is a rather juvenile response to what is clearly a clickbait title. Where would be the fun in knowing what the Doctor's name actually is? Decades of this show would have to be reconceptualized to accommodate this change. As the conclusion of the episode rightly points out, it's not about the Doctor's identity per se, it's about his deeds and how he lives up to his name that gives the character his reputation. Unfortunately, there's a bundle of questionable choices strewn throughout this episode before reaching that point. Like this.
I don't know where I am. I don't know where I am. I don't know where I am.
I don't know where I am.
I don't know where I am. I don't know where I am. I don't know where I am. I don't know where I am.
Oh my god, the pain never ends. The intro makes it very clear that this episode is going to be tidying up how Clara is destined to be tied up with every fibre of the Doctor's being. Most of this montage has an artificial feel to it, with 20th century TV camera quality colliding head-on with a 21st century high-definition companion. I do appreciate the effort with the costumes though, and the ominous idea of the Doctor's past potentially being rewritten by a character we have been simply urged to like for the last 9 episodes kicks things off nicely. We are thrown into that overly familiar setting where the troublesome trio are setting up a mystical Zoom meeting. Strax is in
Glasgow
for some reason, which seems to paint the place as a centre of hypermasculine violence. Instead of putting in any real effort to show us this idea, we just hear the sounds of men cheering and presumably fighting in the background of a scene that contains 3 people. Obviously, Moffat is Scottish and would probably know better than I about such places. I've regrettably never been north of Manchester, so I can't exactly comment on this scene aside from it being mildly humorous. Clara gets a letter inviting her to this psychedelic event whilst making a souffle in honour of her underwritten mother.
It's like my mum always said, the souffle isn't the souffle is the recipe.
It was strange that the kids weren't exactly curious about this letter, considering they all went on a journey in space and time with Clara's boyfriend. They were also curious enough to do research on him in their school's library, yet the idea that they could have opened the letter already or even begged to know what was inside isn't even entertained. Instead, they display as much interest in this letter as a British Republican would towards the coronation. With what was established about these kids by Mark Gatiss and Neil Gaiman, this scene seems completely inconsistent with their prior appearances, showing a lack of communication between them and Moffat. Not only that, but the fact that the unconsciousness-inducing scent was planted inside the letter could only have resulted from an absolute certainty that nobody but Clara would open the letter. How well protected was this letter in order for this insanely precise moment to occur? River appearing in the call definitely had me more excited than any other entrant into this meeting. The fact she is wearing a similar but not identical outfit to when she was copied and pasted in the episode Forest of the Dead hints at the idea that we are not seeing her alive and well. When offered tea, she spawns some champagne instead.
How did you do that?
Disgracefully.
Which showed such overwhelming sass that I couldn't help but yell, "Yas Queen!" at the top of my lungs. Let me be clear, I do like this idea of a candlelit timey-wimey phone call. It's just a shame that we didn't start the episode right here and do without all the letter-opening, spade-whacking faff that took 7 minutes too many to get this episode started. Because of the astronomical exclusivity this phone call invokes, we get some of the most awkward moments you might expect with the 2 companions getting out their cat claws.
Wifey, girlfriend, and mistress.
It doesn't last for very long though, and the actual substance of the meeting suddenly becomes very oddly conceived.
Clarence DeMarco, murderer. He offered us this in exchange for his life.
Space-time coordinates.
What? A Victorian-era murderer knew the location of the Doctor's grave. How? Why? There is an actual answer. A prequel video is produced to explain this conundrum, sort of.
I don't understand.
I don't know why they didn't just slap this at the start of the episode though, because otherwise your casual viewer is going to be very much lost and confused. Worse still, this is when the Great Intelligence's Whispermen break into Madame Vastra's crib because Jenny forgot to lock the door.
Mum, sorry, I just realised I forgot to lock the door.
It doesn't matter, Jenny.
No, Mum, please, I should have locked up before we went into the trance.
Jenny, it doesn't matter.
Someone's broken in.
Oh, you cannot be serious. I know it probably would have been more expensive to have these Whispermen breaking through the glass, but why make your character a complete idiot just to interrupt this conversation? It's once again moments like this where I question how these characters acquire reputations for being so intelligent when they don't even have contingency plans for the worst case scenarios like this. This whole idea is great in concept but terrible in execution, all done to rush the plot along to get the characters where they need to be. I should say that I really like the Rorschach in a top hat design of the Whispermen. Not only do they look great in numbers, but seeing them in the window when the lizard started tripping introduced them subtly and with discomfort. We see them later as well at the grave on Trenzalore, sinisterly matching the appearance of undertakers. There is also this foreboding feeling we get knowing that the characters will be travelling to the Doctor's grave in this episode. Despite appearing as an invincible character, we have to remember that the Doctor hadn't been granted his additional regenerations at this point, with the end of the Doctor's life being a very real possibility. The Doctor goes from his playful naivety to being outright upset. The idea that he has to visit his own grave in order to save his friends is noble, even if they are thoroughly inconsistent and frankly unlikable. I really liked the visuals when they arrive on Trenzalore. It's an ugly-ass planet, but nicely warned by the shot of the Doctor's silhouette being framed in the Tardis doorframe. They land themselves on the surface where we are greeted to a proper spooky graveyard.
Visiting your own grave, anyone would be scared.
The irony being that Clara has already done this in that throwaway scene at the end of The Snowmen. The suspense being built up around this grave was really nice, done via the melancholic music we hear and the idea of a battle being fought with his defenders buried with him. Topping it all off is the sight of the giant Tardis, which Clara mistakes for a monument. It's such a terrific thought that, like a gas leak from a corpse, the Tardis would leak out its bigger on the inside ability to make a terrifyingly large version of itself. It towers over the grave as though it was still protecting the Doctor long after both have passed. Though I don't imagine Rose ever pictured this happening in Parting of the Ways.
Let the TARDIS die. No one can open it, no one will even notice it. And over the years, the world will move on and the box will be buried.
The mystery of River's appearance in this episode also makes itself known with a grave that truly doesn't make any sense. I loved this reveal that we were seeing River as a ghost and not as a character that conveniently shows up. It matches up with the graveyard idea and makes the reveal that the tombstone is a secret entrance to the Doctor's grave satisfying to say the least. It was a rather neat way of revealing to Clara the kind of relationship River and the Doctor have.
Maybe it's a secret entrance to the tomb.
Yes, of course, makes sense. They'd never bury my wife out here.
You're what?
That and the sight of the GI's Whispermen marching towards them adds another layer of foreboding that the characters really shouldn't be here right now. Meanwhile, it turns out that the showrunners didn't have enough courage to kill Jenny off, and the trio are back on their feet being reintroduced to Dr. Simeon, aka the Great Intelligence. Richard E. Grant does a continually good job of acting like a circus ringmaster, attempting to paint the Doctor as a tyrant and not the hero of the universe. It's not a concept that's entirely new though, when you consider that all the Doctor's enemies had previously attempted to put him in a box and erase him from time itself. Being responsible for ending the Time War, which didn't exactly end peacefully either, raises more doubts about our hero's ethical authenticity. He seems to be painting a picture of a character we would not meet until the very end of this episode, which twists the brain around in the moment, but by the end, clarity will have been reached. A lot of context is required for these scenes, and I think it's a tragedy that this story revolves around saving these three conjured characters instead instead of, say, prior companions or people with far greater experience being around this man to give this rescue sequence more significance. Anyway, the Doctor and Clara make it to the top, and finally a character repeating the question, Doctor Who, is less cringy and more of a demand to prevent the deaths of the Doctor's friends. It isn't exactly out of the GI's capabilities to kill, so it very much feels like a threat with bite.
Doctor Who? Please!
Your real name is Please?
The Tardis can still hear me. Lucky thing, since him indoors is being so useless.
I suppose this is a better workaround than having River tell Clara his name and having her blurt it out in slow motion silence or something, but not gonna lie, it still feels a bit cheaty. We wind up seeing the inside of the Doctor's grave, and it turns out that his corpse has been replaced by a gateway into his entire existence. The way the Doctor describes this as scar tissue from being such a frequent time traveler is a fantastic idea. Moffat paints a clear picture that a lifetime of traveling through time comes with some responsibility. The Doctor's insistence on not going to see his own grave is evidence of this. Regardless of the many rules the Doctor apparently lives by, he has still altered the physical state of reality. This idea is what troubles certain aggravated parties like the Great Intelligence or any of the Doctor's greatest enemies. It simultaneously irks me how recycled all of these ideas are. You only need to look back at an episode like The Pandorica Opens to see how familiar all of this is. It's not just the ideas that are recycled though, the cheapness of everything in this episode starts to really ooze through the cracks.
What's wrong?
A universe without the Doctor, there would be consequences.
What are you scanning for?
Local star systems,
Why?
because they're disappearing.
We've literally had the stars going out in Series 4. How can they look worse 5 years on? Oh wait, no, I'll take it one step further. They shut out all of the stars in the Big Bang as well. Another thing, did we really need to see Simeon replacing Clara in all those moments the intro showcased? Seriously, the intro sequence gets condensed and repackaged not once, but twice in the final 10 minutes of this episode. If all I can think about is how the Doctor's adversaries' previous attempts to remove him from existence failed, then all I can wonder is what miraculous reset button will make itself apparent this time. And of course, it's the companion, scattered into his timeline like confetti in order to die for his sins like a female Jesus or something. Things then get out of whack as the Doctor screams whilst Vastra just reads off all of the Doctor's adventures being rewritten. I'm guessing that the pain the Doctor is feeling is from having to accept being a complete failure his entire life instead of being the hero, flooded with shame. This causes Jenny to vanish and Strax to attack Vastra. This moment, again, felt like serious deja vu to me.
Think how many lives that man saved, how many worlds. He saved your life when we met. Jenny! Please, Jenny!
Die, reptile!
Strax! Strax!
Stop it!
Sweetie, what's wrong?
Shut up! Daddy! No! Daddy!
They could have killed off Jenny earlier and given Neve McIntosh more time to shine in this episode. Though I imagine it must be hard with 3 hours in the makeup room preventing genuine emotion to come out.
The stars are going out. And Jenny and Strax are dead.
Seriously, this moment just feels too little too late. With Clara being apparently rescuable from within the Doctor's own timeline, River urges the Doctor not to go in after her.
Sensible!
How are you even doing that?
My thoughts exactly. This whole interaction seems to have been done from the heart and not the head. It's a crowd pleaser moment to give the Doctor some dialogue about how much River's death hurts him, and then they have a smooch before he goes and rescues another girl. Then to turn the entire moment into a joke.
Since nobody else in this room could see you, God knows how that looked.
These underwritten NPC characters. The whole reason Clara could see River to begin with was because she was on the psychedelic phone call with her.
He can't see or hear me, only you can. We're mentally linked. It's the conference call. I kept the line open.
Who else was on the call? All of these Muppets! In spite of all the complaints, this final cliffhanger scene of the episode is terrific. Terrifically teasing, but written excellently. You thought Clara was done in this episode? You think you know the Doctor's timeline? There has been a part of the Doctor's life that has been locked away from our view the entire time, hinted at throughout the course of 7 whole series. It's saddening that Eccleston declined to return to the show to reprise his role, but this substitution with John Hurt was a stroke of genius. The reason why 11 was so emotionally unready to face his grave. The hidden regeneration, seen almost as a silhouette with his back turned. Suddenly, it's not about the Doctor's real name, but the name he chose to live under.
What I did without choice.
I know.
In the name of peace and sanity.
But not in the name of the Doctor.
This is the only incarnation that didn't have that name, and that mystery fills me with goosebumps every time I watch this scene. So, did it suck? Overall, this is a moderately enjoyable episode, largely for it being an effective prelude to the Day of the Doctor, but also how much of a gamble it is to wrestle with a time traveller visiting their own grave. River's inclusion was great, if a little convenient by the end, and Clara's integration into the events of Series 7 was fine. Richard E. Grant's inclusion was good, but sadly not enough was done to make him truly memorable, aside from his goons being pretty terrifying. Unfortunately, the episode needed replacements for the Doctor's outlived recurring friends, and too much of the episode feels like familiar territory thematically. I give The Name of the Doctor a 6 out of 10. Tidying up how Clara is destined to be tied up with... Have I said tied up twice? Yeah. Oh, tidying up and tied up. Okay. Oh, that's volume, not brightness. Yet the idea that they could have opened the idea... with the end of the Doctor's life being a very... bollocks.